This is an opportunity to hear a perspective that you might not be familiar with or to learn some things that you might not already know. We have had Hindu, Buddhist, Methodist, Presbyterian, Mormon, lots of different Jewish panels have been here, but today we have the honor of a conversation with Sister Pat. And one thing that we're going to have today is something that we can't get from a textbook or the internet. We are going to learn her experience and learn from her stories. So we sent out some information about Sister Pat to you previously, and she's going to tell you a lot of things about her. So I'm going to keep what I say about her very brief. And some things I've learned about her within the last hour or so. For one thing, did you know that her middle name is Patricia, not her first name? Doyle is actually her first name. I learned that Sister Pat has a very healthy and wonderful devious streak to her, and I am delighted to know that. She is into photography, which explains a lot. I feel like people who are into photography have a great way of viewing the world. One of the things that she said to me that stuck out the most is that she has experienced God's mercy at a most unexpected time. And isn't that one of the most beautiful things that we can say about ourselves? What I didn't ask her was if she would be willing to autograph my copy of Nuns Having Fun book. So just for that consideration, I'm going to put it on the table in case she will do that for me.
With that introduction, anyway, thank you, Trish. I just came from having a lovely lunch. I'd like to thank the people who provided it. Glad for the company that was there. Met a couple of people that I know and have had an opportunity to spend time with here, not here, but when I was working at St. Mary's in Richmond down on Gaskins Road. I've been here to Cedarfield a few times, primarily in a pastoral capacity. I retired in 2020 from St. Mary's, so previous to that, on several occasions, I had been here for a service, a communion service at down in your lovely chapel. So, you know, this is not a foreign place that I'm visiting. I feel very much at home here. Have had the opportunity to have lunch here before, so have been exposed to some of the amenities that are provided here at Cedarfield. I have to say that I think the renovation, the work that was done to update, as it were, the facility has been amazing. I would give it probably about 10 stars out of 5 in terms of, you know, what I see when I come here and what I experience. So it's really, really nice to be here. Now, I'm going to be probably a little bit different from most of the people that you've had come to speak to you because I'm not making my talk something that's really a teaching of any kind. It's got a little bit of information in it, but the information is really only serves to highlight my experience because I'm not going to be quoting dates or numbers to any great extent. Don't Google me while you're here to check my facts. It's a very common thing, you know, people just kind of pull out their phone and figure out what you're talking about. And so what I say may not match what you read on Google. And AI may have a very, very different view of my life than I do. They don't know the most secret parts of it, which is fortunate, and AI, you're never going to hear that. So that's good. But yes, to begin with, I have a very deep love for God. I have a very deep love for Jesus. I have a very deep relationship with the Spirit. So I try in everything I do to give pleasure to God. And so one of the things I asked before coming here today was that what I say to you will give God pleasure and will invite you to a deeper relationship with God yourself. So a little bit about myself, other than that piece, is I was born and raised for the first 13 years of my life in Colombia, South America, exposed there to a Catholic country, a Catholic way of living, a comfort with religious experiences and with God. So that was, I think, colored a lot of my life. I went to Catholic schools all my life, with the exception maybe of a couple of years when I was really, really young. And at that point, I went to what was called the Anglo-American school. And I've been taught by nuns, predominantly the Madams of the Sacred Heart and the Notre Dame de Namur nuns. So younger, up through high school by Sacred Heart. My college years were spent with Notre Dame sisters. And then my graduate work was all done with Catholic universities in Baltimore and in Detroit, Michigan. In 1955, which is when I graduated from college, I entered the Cloistered Carmelites in Detroit, Michigan. And at that point in my life, I had come to a relationship with 3 women. And what was interesting about these 3 women was that they were probably 10 to 20 years apart. So there were like 3 generations, and I made the 4th. So it was an interesting group of women who met together predominantly to take advantage of things that were offered at the Carmelite monastery for men, which was just adjacent to Trinity College, where I went to college, to my undergraduate work. And we did a lot of talking. We did a lot of sharing about life, and certainly their interest was very much in what I was going to do with my life. And so I think they really programmed me, I have to say, really programmed me to become a nun. I had had some admiration for women religious, had often thought to myself, that looks kind of interesting, but never really attracted specifically until I met these 3 women, and we began kind of a spiritual journey together. So in my senior year at Trinity, I came in touch with, well, first we were taught by Dominicans at Trinity, and we were taught from St. Thomas Aquinas. We did the Summa, one of each of the volumes, freshman, sophomore, and junior year. We didn't senior year. We had another priest who came in to teach us theology that year. So I was exposed to the Dominicans and exposed to their spirituality, to the Dominican House of Studies, located right near the college. And so I asked one of the priests who had been one of my teachers to be my spiritual director in that last couple of years of my time at Trinity. And again, kind of a programming, you just look at this and you don't realize what's happening in your life. And nothing that I say here today is a criticism, because it was all in some way or another God working in my life. I could have gone a very different direction in my life, and that's why I say my experience of God's mercy, which came to me much later in life, but opened up to me the view of how much God had really directed my life through everything. It didn't matter where it was, what it was, but all through my life I have been very much directed by the Holy Spirit. So anyway, as I was going through this period in my life, I became very much exposed to the Carmelite uh, spirituality. And it's a spirituality which has marked my life, which I love. And just recently, I had an interesting experience. I was thinking to myself, I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed there. I really love that spirituality. And all of a sudden, I had this sense within myself, you still have that spirituality. You never left it. You took it with you. And that brought a great deal of peace to my heart, because one of my first major decisions in my life was made to leave Carmel in 1971. I entered in 1955 and I left in 1971. So where do we go from here? I'm exposed to Carmelite spirituality. What brings me at this point to share with you Vatican II? What makes that important at this point in my life? And what makes it important is that Vatican II severely marked my decision. Okay, let me take you back just a little bit. I go into Carmel in 1955. I'm feeling very special because, first of all, I've been told that my life choice is a very special one, and particularly a life choice to Carmel. Not many people make that choice. Oh, I'm a perfectionist. That's what marks my life. Well, that sounds good to me, right? I'm going to be perfect, and I'm entering the most perfect community to do that. Oh, wow, this is really, really great. Okay, but this now demands that I leave the world. That's the next major thing. So I'm entering this special community. I'm leaving the world. What about who I am and what has happened to me previous to this? Is that just crossed out of my life? Yeah, pretty much. So I enter Carmel, and when I enter Carmel, I don't know how many of you are kind of aware of what Carmelite life is, but it's pretty strict. And you do leave the world, as it were. You do see yourself as special. I didn't like that. That didn't feel good to me. I can remember when I left Trinity, and I'd tell people that I was going to be a nun and I was going to Carmel, they would say to me, oh, sister, oh, not sister, because I wasn't sister, Pat, pray for me, please pray for me. And I'd say, okay, that sounds good, but in return, you pray for me. Oh, no, you're holy. No, you're fine, just pray for me, I'm the sinner. And I think, what's wrong with this picture? You have no idea who I really am. You don't have any idea of what I've lived in my life or choices I've made in my life or who I am. So that bothered me a great deal. The other thing that bothered me was this business of leaving the world, because I loved the world. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I loved the world that God had created. I loved creation itself. I loved everything about it. But does that mean I've got to just leave it all? And interestingly, in Carmel, you pretty much do leave it, because they build up a big wall around you. You don't see anybody. You wear a veil over your face when you're visiting at the Great now being where the greats are, so it's your visiting room. And so all these things were just churning inside of me. The first meeting we had with one of the provincial fathers was asking me, well, sister, how old are you? And I'm thinking, oh, why do you want to know how old I am? And then one of the sisters pokes me and she says, 6 months, 6 months. I thought, I'm not 6 months old. Oh, yes, because you've died to the world. You've entered Carmel. You've only been here 6 months, so now you're 6 months old. So again, this is jarring to me. Letters I got kept saying, you're in this wonderful life. You're put on a pedestal. And I didn't belong there. So, I mean, there's all of these things going on in your head, but at the same time, you just kind of toss them back because this is your vocation, this is the life you're living, and this is where you are. So anyway, so life goes on, and at this point then, I become, I just lost the microphone.
It's gone.
Well, thank you very much.
We can always give
Check,
this one.
check, check.
Okay. All right, now it blows.
We'll try again. Now I have to figure out where I left off. But anyway, so I'm just going to start wherever this takes me at this point. And so there's all these things that are jarring to me, but because of where I am and what I've chosen to do with my life and how I feel I've been called by God, I just set aside. And so I'm there for 15 years, and all of a sudden we begin to hear in the cloister, we didn't hear a lot, but we heard this, that the Vatican Council II has been called, and they're meeting, and they're going to do some things, and that's going to involve us. So maybe, I don't know, just a little aside right now before going further with what I'm, in terms of my own life, you know, what is Vatican II, and how did we get there, and what did this mean for religious life, and what had happened before? So just a quick kind of little journey through, first of all, how does religious life, how did that develop? How did that come to be? How did this situation that I'm in at this point, that I'm joining a community dedicated solely to living the Carmelite life, separated from the world, in a state of perfection? So how did that happen? How did that develop? Religious life, excuse me, began very early in the church. In fact, that kind of leaving the world stuff had even happened before in some of the other surrounding cultures. But now Jesus has come, Jesus has lived, Jesus has spoken to us, Jesus has died, and Jesus has risen, and now his followers are trying to put into their lives the words that he spoke and what he asked of them, and to pass that on. So as a result of all of that, and we know that in the Gospels, Jesus does make remarks about how important it is to be not of the world, but of the world. And that we're all called, in a sense, to follow his word. And so in the early church, the first thing that started, where we hear about them in the Acts of the Apostles, the virgins and the widows, that these were the people that the deacons were originally created to provide for. So the virgins make a vow of virginity, and they're taken care of by the bishop. The widows they're not going to get married a second time, so they devote themselves to the service of the needs within the community. So that's how religious life, the origins of it, really start in terms of Christianity. From that point on, we have people who flee the world, the hermits that left the world because they couldn't dedicate themselves fully to following Christ. So to be able to do that, they leave the world, they go out in the deserts. Then following that, we have monasticism, because it turns out that not too many people are comfortable living alone out in the desert. So they begin to form little communities. And so eventually in the 5th century, we have Benedict, who begins the Benedictine order, and we see that all over. We have the Benedictine sisters here in Richmond. We have communities and monasteries of houses of Benedictines all over the world, and that has started in the 5th century. That goes on for a number of years, and then eventually we begin to have the orders that probably around the 12th century, we have the Franciscans, the Dominicans. These are now preaching orders. These are orders that are not, well, the Dominicans are the preachers. Franciscans spread the word a different way. But they're spreading the call of Jesus to discipleship, and they do that in a very, very, dramatic way, especially if you remember Francis of Assisi and his call and how he lived, how he separated himself from his family when they did not want him to do that. So then following that, we have, interestingly at this point, this is now Middle Ages, we have Thomas Aquinas starting, the one that I learned some about at Trinity, but the kind of the preeminent teacher of doctrine. And he's also saying in his writings that it's far superior to follow the councils, the evangelical councils, which have come to be known as poverty, chastity, and obedience. It's far better and a more perfect thing to do that than to get married. So now he's pushing this fact that the vows are more perfect than anything else in the sacrament of marriage. And then, and that this is, all y'all, as it were, are only required to follow the commandments. That's basically what Thomas Aquinas said. So this, I'm thinking, here we go again. This is this kind of separation and this superiority bit. And so then, following that, we have, very shortly thereafter, things are going on in the church. There are practices that some people are becoming uncomfortable with. If you remember, Luther was very upset about the sale of indulgences. He was upset about some other things. He asked the church to look to reform, and the church, made a choice not to do that. But then, so the Council of Trent, at this point, now this is another thing that steps in at this point. There have been lots and lots of councils, but the Council of Trent in 1543 then steps in to kind of tighten the ship, batten down the hatches, defend itself particularly from the Reformation, and to make some very important statements about what this means. So don't get caught into all that stuff that's going on outside the church right now. That's basically what the council is saying, and the council defines doctrines. The council, makes pronouncements. The council also pushes the superiority of the vows of religious life over anything else. They're superior to that. And this goes on now. So this is 1543, goes on for, the council takes about, I think almost like 20 years or so to come up with all of its edicts and everything that it says. That tightens the church, the Catholic Church, and kind of tells it not to get too much immersed in the world. So here we are again, step aside from the world kind of a thing. And then, don't get involved. Don't especially with those reformers, don't get involved with them. Don't fall under their influence. And I'm saying this kind of just facetiously, as it were, but it's kind of just nitty-gritty what they've come up with. So the Council of Trent now supports what Thomas Aquinas has said, and life goes on. So for 400 years, up until the 20th century, this is how the church operated, sort of, what do you call it, as I said, battening down the hatches, sort of just surrounding itself with itself and not getting involved in so much of the stuff that's going on, except just to say it's wrong. And so then, some other different kinds of communities have come into existence at this point, the Jesuits. So the Jesuits are doing something to religious life that changes. So the separation from the world, the fleeing from the world, which took place in those early hermits, is now being carried out by cloistering, by segregating, by keeping apart. And so now we're coming into the 20th century. Pius X is now the pontiff, and he actually issues what is called the Oath Against Modernism. None of us were living at that time. But what he did, everybody had to make an oath of allegiance to the doctrine of the church. So that's what, and very simply, modernism. It says stay away. Do not get concerned about those things that are going on out there. And there were some really important and good things that were going on out. The whole beginning of scriptural studies, the Reformation started such a variety of growth spiritually and physically. I mean, in the sense of what it brought to people. So now we're up in the 20th century. We've got this condemnation of modernism, and this is now continues through the time of Pius XII. Pius XII is, and I think previous to that there was some light coming into the church at that point, and Pius XII finally issues some decrees, some writings that say, yes, Scripture scholars should be allowed to investigate Scripture study, take advantage of some of those wonderful things that are happening out among the Protestants, as would be the language that they would use, and open the doors for the beginning of the church to get involved once again in things that were going on around it. Okay, so now we continue on. Pius XII dies, and he is succeeded by John the 23rd. Now, when they elected John the 23rd in 62, anyway, in that timeline, when they elected him, they thought they're just electing some old man that's not going to cause any problem, just keep things as they are. And lo and behold, he says, I'm going to call this council, this is Vatican II now, I'm going to call this council, and I want to open the windows of the church. I want to become a part of the world out there. We need to begin to understand what's going on out there, and we need to invite ourselves back into the world. So now we're up to 1962 when the council opens. Now I am in Carmel at this point. We're talking about Vatican II. The interesting thing about Vatican II to me is how quickly those decrees were written, those decrees were published. There were 21 major statements about all kinds of things in the Catholic Church, from liturgy to the role of bishops, to the mystery of the church, to the renewal of religious life, to a decree on ecumenism, to the decree on religious liberty, to, this little book has them all, and there are 21 of them, and it's like everything in the world that you could have talked about is discussed within these 3 years, and all the documents are already available by the third year, by the 1965. They're not published yet, but they're written, and they've been approved by the council, they've been approved by the Pope, and they come into circulation. So I'm in my little convent, and I have to tell you, I was not the best of best of nuns. I really wasn't. I'm in this holy order, but I was going to survive. I wasn't about to, lose my mind, as it were. And again, this is not critical. This is me personally. I had an amazing education, very little opportunity to continue to study, because the horarium for the community was pray, work, eat, recreate, pray, no working at night, go to bed, get up in the morning, pray. It was constant. There was no time free, actually, to do continued study. And I hungered for that. I wanted to learn. And this is like a confession, but, we were not allowed to read newspapers. We were not even allowed to read the Catholic Virginian. But the prioress and I kind of, I don't know, I used to talk to her at recreation, and one day she said, I just hate checking those papers to see what's good for the nuns to know. And I'd say, well, mother, I'd be happy to do that for you. And she said, "Oh, wonderful, wonderful. You check the Catholic Virginian, you circle what should be read, and we'll read it in the refectory." Now, the daily paper was not available that way, but when I was ironing the habit or whatever was going on, those papers were on the floor. And we were supposed to, like, practice modesty of the eyes. So how do you practice modesty of the eyes when the newspaper is lying right around you and you've got headlines? And so that's how I sort of, in some ways, stayed in touch with what was going on. I never considered it sinful. I just thought it's called survival. It's how you survive in the midst of what isn't somewhat oppressive situation. So anyway, so I was kind of up to date on some of this stuff, and because of reading the Catholic Virginian, I was very much aware of what was going on with the council and what was happening, and tried as much as possible to share what I thought would get past any other screening with the nuns. How interested they were was not my concern, but it was just to make it available to them. So little by little, things begin to become discussion. Well, all those things that had been troubling to me from the very beginning, as leaving the world, the perfect life, superiority, all of that was being discussed at Vatican II. And women in religious life were already there. They were waiting for something to trigger the opportunity to deal with these issues in their own communities. In fact, some of those women had already, because they began to do some traveling, congregational traveling and gathering for, like, not yet the Leadership Women's Council of Religious, but just some where they were going out to do some teaching in different communities, began to share a lot of this information. So they were like waiting for an opportunity to do something about things that they saw important to be changed in life. Now, the documents of the council there was one on the renewal or bringing up to date, is how it was written, the decree on the up-to-date renewal of religious or something like that. I think it should have been, you can't just up to date, you have to go on. So you should have been up to date, and, it's like beginning something, because when you begin to renew, you can't go backward. You start experimenting, you don't put the genie back in the bottle. It's like slicing the pillowcase and tossing the feathers, and then being asked to collect the feathers and put them back in the pillow. So it's like this opened doors like you wouldn't believe. It was amazing. But the most interesting thing of all was that it wasn't in the document for the renewal of religious life that women religious I guess, gain the most. They gain the most from two documents, one on the mystery of the church and the other one on the pastoral involvement of the church in the modern world. So in the first document that I mentioned, the mystery of the church, it's called Lumen Gentium, there was a statement in there that all people, I should read it to you because it's probably won't find it. No, I'll do it from here then. It said, it is therefore quite clear that all Christians in any state or walk of life are called to the fullness of Christian life and the perfection of love. And by this holiness, a more human manner of life is fostered also in earthly society. So this was the first breakthrough. Holiness is not limited to religious. Holiness belongs to everybody. You and I are called to holiness. My holiness is no higher than your holiness, or the call to that holiness how we live it out may be a little bit different, but we're all called to holiness. So I'm not called to a higher holiness than you are called to. So that was the first thing that women religious latched onto outside of the renewal document. That was the first one. The second one was taken from Gaudium et Spes, which said, and this is about the fleeing from the world, about not getting involved. It said, the joy and hope, the grief and anguish of the men of our time. That's the other thing about these documents. We're all men. Women are not distinguished, even in the religious one. The joy and hope, the grief and anguish of the men of our time, especially of those who are poor or afflicted in any way, are the joy and hope, the grief and anguish of the followers of Christ as well. So in other words, there is nothing in the world. The church, and it goes on in many, many ways to speak about this, but it's the responsibility of the church to be immersed in the world, to know what is going on. This must read the signs of the times. That was one of the other statements out of this document, that the church must read the signs of the times and act accordingly. Women religious grabbed onto these two documents, that the religious life is not superior, and secondly, that we are in the world, though not of it. And that's from the words of Jesus. So what is said to women religious was, you do not flee the world, you are in the world, and you participate in everything that is good, and you make yourself connected with all the suffering, the anguish, the pain that is in the world. And so you can't do that by separating yourself from the world because you're not aware of it. So that became the kind of the thing that began all the changes in religious life. Now, not to criticize again, because this is not meant to be something that if you don't do this, you're not right, or if you do this, you're wrong. But many women religious saw this immediately as a need to move away from things that made them special. So what was one of the first things that made them special, that made them stand out, was the habit. What else was it? That was their cloistered life, their being in a convent, not able to leave, the way that they acted with other people, the kind of the discipline that was going on, the fact that and there were so many of these things. You couldn't visit with your family. You could only go to visit your family if someone had died. Just however different communities regulated that for themselves. And so, it's saying there have to be changes. No woman, religious or any woman at this point, had been able to study theology and become a theologian. So this opened the door for those kinds of studies. So it opened the doors for people to be involved in church ministry. It was no longer just teaching in school or just working in a hospital, or that communities had a distinctive ministry. No, now many ministries, they may have had a distinctive ministry, but there was nothing against other ministries that these women religious might be involved in. But this created a great deal of struggle. I guess I could ask each one of you that in any way was connected with these things when they happened, how you felt when all of a sudden, women religious are no longer in the habit. What's happening when you're seeing a nun driving a car? What happens when you meet a nun in the store somewhere? What changes for you? How do you see that person now that you're not experiencing them in a habit or in a particular place to be, or whatever is happening in life? What do you experience as a family who now can have your daughter or I don't talk about the men religious because I'm not sure exactly what they all did, but what can you, in the sense of, how they're able now to come home. I have friends, and one of the sisters in my community now, who says that they could never eat with anyone else. If they could eat among themselves with the religious in the convent, but if you went out, you didn't eat at home with your family. It's like you didn't eat food, I guess. I don't know what the reasoning behind that was, but there were these things that just didn't make sense. Now, there, of course, are many communities who did not do this, who chose not to, who still are in the habit. It doesn't make it doesn't make them wrong, it doesn't make them right. It just means that the church now respects women and their decisions and their experience and their ability to regulate their own lives. Everything previous to this had been regulated by by men, and it was time for the women to begin to kind of take that responsibility on for themselves. Now, the decree for religious renewal said that they should go back to their, in a sense, see what needed to be changed, check with their founders, and then and make their decision in community. Now, this is where things really fell apart for me in my community, because every time you would mention something, they would say, oh, no, Holy Mother said, we should never change anything. And so that cut the feet off of anything you might be talking about. The community that I belong to originally still wears the original habit. They never modified the habit. They've not done, although other communities in that same, Carmelite grouping have changed, have reduced, modified their habits, or in some cases they now are also not in clothes. I mean, just in regular clothing. So it to some degree, it's like respecting people where they are, but in no way oppressing a community and not giving it a chance to speak what it sees to be important for its own life. So in the process of all of this for myself, I struggled. I struggled because I knew, what was better for me. I knew what God was, in a sense, directing me to. I really needed to move out of this very strict community to one where I could continue my studies, where I could become involved with people, where I could, just in a sense, give of the best of myself. And I can remember I ended up at one point with ulcers in my community. I'd been in there for 11 years, and I ended up having to have I had ulcers. And I would be in the hospital, and these sisters would say to me, "What are you doing in that community? How can you live in it, given your particular temperament and your wonderful opportunities to connect with people?" And I would just say, well, that's God's grace, I guess, that I've been able to do that. But in the long run, I know now, and I mean, as I say, I loved my time in Carmel. I never regret it. And at this point in my life, I still feel very much that the very best of what I had there, I still have with me. But it began a long journey for me at that point, because I could see what the documents opened up for us and what a community in itself chose not to be involved with, and then at the same time to trust that God was leading me to something new and something better for me. I stayed in touch with the sisters that were in that community. All of them are deceased now, and there's a whole group of new people there that I'm not acquainted with. But at the same time, it's like it's important to know that as human beings, we have a responsibility for ourselves to not just to be pushed around, as it were, but also to seek where we are called and what that means in our own lives. I did not choose to leave religious life. That was not my choice. But in that, I chose to leave a particular way of living that life. and it was a long, long journey. In the long term, 4 sisters from that community left. There were 4 of us. 3 others left besides me. We spent a number of years discerning where we would go, what community we would want to become part of. And for a long time, we remained just a community in the Archdiocese of Detroit that just was searching. And they allowed us to do that, which was really a remarkable thing to do. A lot of criticism, certainly across the board. I had my friends who were the 3 ladies that I had been connected with from very early on, and my spiritual director, both were very angry all 4 of them were very angry at me for the choice I made. And I never could in any way reconcile with them for what I did. So that was very, very hard to do. But at the same time, it was, for me, the choice I had to make. So what comes of all of this is, and how did I feel, at this point, as all of this was going on in my life? I felt very much affirmed in my understanding of what I saw to be religious life. I saw for myself that the gifts that I had were able to be used in a way that I never expected. I could never understand when I was in the convent why we as women were never allowed to go out of the monastery as the men were. Why did the men go out and study and minister while we could not do that? It was very hard for me to understand. I guess the question I should have asked myself at that point was not why can we not do it, but why can I not do it? Because the sisters that were there in the community seemed to be fine, and as I say, they've all passed away. They remained until the end of their lives in that community, so they found that to be very life-giving for them. So it became a question rather of myself and the responsibility I had before God. So I ended up being able to study, and I got my graduate degrees, and then I was able to go into pastoral ministry in the church, which I was in from 1974 to 2020, and to just form wonderful relationships with the people in my parishes that I worked with, and a lot of those relationships have maintained. I'm still very much connected with, feel very much loved when I go back to those communities, and I'm so grateful to God for the gift of a church who eventually opened that door for me. Now, in today's world, there's still a lot of rancor in the Catholic Church community about Vatican II. People who still do not agree with what the Church did, the doors that were opened, the entrance of humanity into a world for healing, for loving, for teaching, for communicating, for all the various things that have been opened up within that church community now. But there's still many people who, I get approached, where's your habit? Every time, this is Sister so, well, where's your habit, sister? It's like that's identified. But the difficulty that people don't understand was that when you're wearing a habit, you're not one with anymore. You're separate. You're different. You don't have the entrance into people's lives, and people don't have the ability to know you, and to kind of in loving fellowship within a church community to grow and help each other to do what God wants us to do in this world, which is to be. The community that I belong to now, our motto is that all may be one. It's taken from the priestly prayer of Jesus, that all may be one, Father, as you are in me and I in you, that they may be one in us. And it's not an easy thing if you're in a habit to do that, because people still associate you differently. They can, they look at you differently. They perceive you to be different. They're not themselves. And I love people, and I just have been very blessed with that situation of entering into pastoral ministry and becoming able to minister to people in that regard. I don't know what the time is. Yeah, a little bit long. But I just kind of in closing, really struck me really funny. I pulled up two things happened to me. I guess this is how I figure out God has a real sense of humor. Pulled up on my America magazine, which is a Jesuit magazine. I have that on my phone, and I pulled it up. It keeps me very much in touch with what the Pope is saying and doing, and what's going on in various parts of the world about religious things. But anyway, so this thing came up, and it said, and I wish I could pull it up again, but it's that how all the priests and the monsignors and everybody in Rome runs around in that long clerical outfit that they wear. And this said that this is starting to happen here in the United States as well, too. And I thought to myself, thank you, Jesus. This is really funny. This is like, get your habit, put on your habit. But what it says is that some people feel better. Some people feel more comfortable, and that's okay. But it's not, it's like respecting everybody where they are. And the other funny thing that happened is this morning it came yesterday, but I didn't get it till this morning, an email from the diocese. So this is how the church, this church still has control, and the church wants to know, how many sisters are in your community? How many houses do you have? What's your apostolic work? And so it's like they're still in control. But I just had to laugh because I thought, you think you're kind of moved away from some of that, but you really haven't. You're still very much exposed to all of this. And I thought that's really especially as I was doing this talk here, I said, that's really funny. So, because I don't know how you all feel about it. You might have some very deep feelings about sisters wearing habits and priests wearing clerical outfits. And that's fine. That's fine. But at the same time, it's respecting, where other people might be. So, but anyway, thank you very much. I don't know if you have any questions or anything other that I can. I apologize for taking a little bit longer than I was supposed to, but so hopefully it was helpful.
If you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll bring the mic to you.
So glad to have you with us, sister. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm curious about how you chose the ministry within the local churches rather than some other type of venture or journey in the church.
Thank you. One of the things that I found very hard when I was making my decision about going to Carmel, and people were saying to me, oh, my goodness, you've been educated by the Sacred Heart nuns, you've been educated by the Notre Dame de Nemours nuns, you should go into teaching. And I thought, not me. It's not my gift. It's not my gift. And I had become aware of that through years of catechizing, and kind of stuff we do in parishes. I said, I can't. That's not what I want to do. I did eventually do a little teaching in Detroit at Mercy College in Scripture, but that's because I had studied Scripture on a graduate level and just felt, it's a whole different ballgame when you're in a graduate. But how did I choose pastoral ministry, which was not, and I got a real blessing in terms of my job. How did I choose that? It's because I felt, it kind of came to me first. Let me put it that way. In Detroit, when we were still searching for where, what we would get involved with, the four of us that were doing this, we had to look for a place to live. And it turned out there was a priest, the convent had moved, had emptied and moved, and so he had an empty convent. And so he said, in exchange for your working here at the parish for free, we'll let you use the convent to live in. So that's how I first got introduced to it. So I went to work in the parish office, and my friend, one of the sisters, became the musician at the parish. The other sister became, she opened up the school again, and the fourth one decided to leave. So there was just three of us at that point. But we had free rent and board, and I had the opportunity to get involved in a parish community, which all of a sudden made sense to me. And I did, I did some, adult formation. And I started running I did the RCIA in the parish, which was the process by which adults become Catholic, now known as the OCIA, not the RCIA anymore. And so that fascinated me. That's when I went in for my master's degree at there in Detroit, and then finally went on for my Doctor of Ministry degree, and that just opened the door for me because I began doing things with parishioners, and I got to do what it's not much available anymore. I was called a pastoral associate, and there are pastoral associates now, but they're pastoral associates in education or pastoral associates in music, or they kind of divided it up. I got to do the whole thing. I got to be involved in the totality of parish work. So I was, for a great portion of the time that I worked in parishes, I was like the sub for the pastor, except in sacramental things. So it's like, that's how God sort of led me down the road. I didn't really specifically choose it for myself, but it's what spoke to me. Thank you.
First of all, thank you. You did a remarkable job of taking a very long and complex history and making it understandable. Secondly, I taught scripture for 6 years at Newton College of the Sacred Heart. As a Protestant, with the madams.
Yeah.
Yes, your education. As a Protestant, I had the privilege of watching women struggle with exactly what you're talking about. A number of the younger nuns in particular already were out of habit, but some of the older nuns weren't quite sure. Mm-hmm. And I remember one nun who asked to sit in on my class, Sister Phyllis Heisler, now departed.
Phyllis Heisler?
You knew Phyllis?
I did, yes. Oh my goodness, yes.
She was a marvelous, marvelous woman. And when I first met her, my first year there in 1969, she was in full habit. I was there the last 6 years of the college till it closed. During that 6 years, she went to partial habit to dress like you did. Now here's the cute story. This was a women's college. All these young women celebrated birthdays. So, we'd take time in class and sing something and all that. But one young woman said to Phyllis Heisler, "Oh, I feel so old, I'm 21. And Phyllis Heisler, who was then well up in her 70s, said, "Young ladies, I have found every age has its graces." The two of them became friends, and the young woman taught Phyllis Heisler how to use makeup.
I have to tell you a story about Phyllis Heisler. Phyllis Heisler was, we called her Mother Heisler. She was our dean of students at Eden Hall at the convent that I was, where I studied. And when I came out of, no, this was before, this is when I was going to college, I intended to become a lawyer. That was my plan, not to be a nun, to be a lawyer. And so I was looking at where to go. And of course, I lived in Charlottesville, so it was natural to think of the University of Virginia. So I wrote to my school, Eden Hall, and Mother Heisler was there, and I asked if they would send my transcripts to UVA. She wrote me back a letter that would have just crushed you. because I was going to a non-Catholic college. And in those days, I mean, this is how you can move from being extremely rigid to being not the opposite, but just what is beautiful about yourself. And so she told me, a scathing letter told me that if I chose to go to a non-Catholic college, that I would be like my Child of Mary medal would be taken away from me, you know, and my mother said my face just turned ashen. And so, well, you know, obedient, perfectionist lady that I was, I ended up at Trinity College. I did not go to UVA. But many years later, Mother Heisler wrote or told someone, because the message got back to me, she said, I can't imagine how crushed Pat must have been to have received that letter from me. I wish I could apologize to her. That was Mother Heisler. And I just think, just your being here today says to me, she knows that. She knows that, you know, it's just one of those graced moments. So thank you for that.
Sister Pat, I just want your opinion. I, of course, lived through Vatican II, and there are many things that I applauded, like the shedding of the habit. But one thing that I've always missed, and I just want your opinion on it, I traveled a great deal with my family. I could go anywhere in the world and hear a Mass in Latin. I understand the need to make the Mass vernacular for the people, but I still miss a Latin Mass, and I'm happy that some parishes are going back to giving a Latin Mass at some point during the Sunday or Saturday, and especially when I travel abroad, because I can hear the Mass. It's the same everywhere in the world, and I just wonder your opinion on that.
The way I dealt with that with myself was I came to understand God in a new way. The Latin Mass is always for me. Now, as I say, this is for me. For me, is God is up there. The priest has his back to me. It's like, and I loved it when I was growing up. I had nothing wrong with that, but it made God almost unreachable. The liturgy today is God is around us. God is right here. God faces me. I understand every word that is spoken of. I'm not reading it in an English language is being said in another language. I just can listen. I just can be. And so that's what the value of it is for me. Is my image of who God is what makes the difference to me. The transcendent God, the way out there God, the unreachable God, the holy God, the almighty God, all those titles. The liturgy of today is God is here. God is within me. God is around me. God is right here. So I don't, people, there are, for someone who is nourished and fed by that, what's wrong with that? Yes. But at the same time, actually the Pope has just recently finished in his audiences on Sundays or on Wednesdays in Rome, just finished. He's going through all the Vatican II documents, and the very first document is the document on the liturgy, and he's just finished explaining that and walking through how important it is for us to abide by the church. Not that it's wrong, not the other isn't wrong, but and it's fine. But it's like this is what it says. This is the mystery of God is here, is facing us. It invites us to not to. I know, I'm not worthy of that. I'm not worthy, but this I can be a part of because of the way God is for me. So I don't know if that helps. Yeah.
I think that's it for our questions.
I didn't hear it, so I don't know what you said.
I said I think that's it
Oh,
for all of
okay.
our questions. I don't see any more hands. We'll make this a last call.